Welcome back to the Figureball YouTube channel. I'm Mr. Coffee, and today we're going to be taking a look at the newly tooled Black Series Farmboy Luke Skywalker. I picked this figure up for the standard retail price of $25 from Amazon. He is a mainline figure, so you can find him at big box retailers such as Walmart and Target, as well as online stores. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get a closer look at the box. Getting a closer look, we have our Star Wars The Black Series logo at the top with a nice view of the figure and his accessories. He is of course from Episode 4 in New Hope, and down at the bottom we have our choking hazard warnings and the Hasbro logo. He is number 9 in the A New Hope lineup with his name in a nice bold text. Moving on to the side, we have a look at the beautiful mural art of him holding his binocs, as well as Luke Skywalker down at the bottom. Taking a look at the back, we have a condensed image of that same mural art, as well as a small summary that reads, Luke Skywalker was a Tatooine farm boy who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the greatest Jedi the galaxy has ever known. Down at the bottom, we have our warnings and legal information. And lastly, we have one more look at the side of the figure through that plastic window with that Black Series logo one more time. Now, let's go ahead and get into the unboxing and free Luke from his plastic prison. Taking a closer look at the accessories, we have Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. The blade is cast in a very nice opaque blue plastic, and the hilt has a very nice metallic silver paint for the base color. All the details are nicely sculpted, and there is a nice metallic gold paint used for the ignition switch, as well as some black paint down on the grips. There is a nice D-ring sculpted on the bottom, and the blade is removable with a small notch in it to sit flush with the top of the hilt. Up next, we do have Luke's binocs that he is seen using throughout his scenes on Tatooine. The sculpted detail is very nice, and there is a small hole in the back so that it can be stored on his belt. It is absolutely loaded with a ton of those silver paint hits, very nice and cleanly applied all over, and has every detail that you would expect to see. On Luke's belt, there is a small clip that allows both the lightsaber to hang onto, as well as the binocs to recreate any moment you would want to do from the film. Both of them do sit very nice and flush with the figure. And now that we've taken a closer look at the accessories, let's get Luke himself in the light box. And here we have Luke Skywalker standing straight up and down in a neutral pose. First impressions are that aesthetically, the body of the figure does look very nice with his sculpted robes and some nice details transitioned down to the legs with his pants and the wrap style boot design. Unfortunately, the standout feature is the head sculpt and its lack of a proper Mark Hamill likeness. There is a nice amount of paint on his belt and does appear to be a wash down on the lower legs, but let's just go ahead and get a closer look at some of those details. Taking a closer look at Luke, we will start off with the head sculpt. I think one of the main things throwing it off for me is the sculpt as well as the color of the hair and some of the features just looking a bit off alongside the neck coming off as a bit too long. Regardless, it does feature some standard Hamill features like the blue eyes, which are nicely printed, and the divot in his chin. I do overall think that the latest Return of the Jedi Luke got the likeness down a bit better, but that was still not really close to perfect for me personally. Transitioning down, we do have his tunic with some very nice folds and wrinkles sculpted onto it to simulate the effects of it being cloth that show throughout the entire torso. The sleeves also have some nice folds on them, especially down towards the bottom, but they do come off as a bit bulkier than they should for me, as opposed to coming off as cloth sleeves that would be a little more compressed to your arms. We do have some nicely sculpted bits on his belt, including the little communicator that has some nice silver paint applied. There are some tiny silver paint hits on the buttons, which do look very clean and add that extra bit of detail to the whole thing, and the buckle on the front does have some inkjet printed weathering to give off that vibe of some dirt buildup. The skirt piece does continue a lot of that sculpt work from the upper tunic with some nice attention to detail to keep that cloth style aesthetic. Moving down to the legs, we can see them continue the trend of nice folds throughout, as well as the color change being a nice transition to show the difference of color between the tunic and the pants. The boots are nicely sculpted to simulate the very unique design of the boots used on the original costume that look like wraps leading up to a knee-high style. There does appear to be a nice paint wash on the boots to continue that grimy and sandy tattooing look with some cleanly applied paint down at the soles. I do like how they sculpted the pants to come down and cover up the hinge used for the knee articulation, as well as the asymmetrical look to the legs. Getting into three things I do like about the figure, I do love the little bit of engineering they did for the arm inside the sleeve. At the top of it is a ball joint that allows for a little bit of movement up and down inside the sleeve itself to help with some posing, and it does have a nice little bit of range to it. The second thing is I really appreciate them including the binocs as an accessory. They have some great sculpted detail and a surprising amount of paint on them, and I really like how they are able to be hung on the little clip sticking off of Luke's belt. The third thing is the nice addition of this extra pouch on the back of the belt that is eventually removed while Luke is still on Tatooine. It does have a little hook on the back of it so it can be removed and just adds another little nice attention to detail to help with however you want Luke to look, depending on whatever pose you want from any stage of the film. Going over the articulation, we do have a dumbbell joint at the top of the neck going into the head and a ball at the top of the torso that allows for this far forward and this far back before the sculpt of the hair and collar crash into each other. We also get some nice rotation as well as some tilt. At the shoulder is a hinge with a pin that goes into a butterfly joint, and it reaches around 90 degrees. The butterfly joint does get a nice amount of range forward, as well as a great amount of range backwards before being hindered by the torso overlay. The single hinge at the elbow hits slightly past 90 degrees and has some swivel. Both of the wrists do feature vertical hinges as well as the arm being on that ball joint to allow for some nice movement inside the sleeve, but the wrist can be a bit difficult to move independent to the arm. There is a single ball at the waist that allows for not much movement forward due to the overlay and belt, but you do get quite a bit of range backwards. You do also get some swivel and some nice tilt side to side. Unfortunately, there is no thigh swivel, but there is a ball coming out of the hip into the top of the leg that allows him to kick out to around 90 degrees, even with the skirt piece in the way. He does have a single hinge knee that gets around 90 degrees, as well as also having some swivel. There is a nice swivel at the boot, as well as a hinge at the ankle that gets a ton of range backwards, but not a lot of range forwards. There is also a forward-facing pin at the foot for some rocker. Getting into 3 things I dislike on the figure, the biggest offender and largest disappointment is the head sculpt. It honestly feels like a major step back compared to the usual quality we can expect from a modern Black Series figure. It more resembles Ryan from The Boys as opposed to Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, and really brings down for me what should have been a slam dunk release. The second disappointing thing is the lack of thigh swivel, but this transcends just Luke. The way Hasbro has engineered the hips allows for next to no movement at the hips and can make posing difficult as well as unnatural when you rotate the knees and boots but the thighs are still facing forward. The third thing is just the lack of paint on the body itself. The boots have that nice wash on them, but I would have liked to see one also put on the rest of the body, including the pants and tunic, to really drive in that gritty aesthetic we see from Tatooine. But again, paint is more so just an issue with Hasbro figures in general, and I'm glad they prioritize paint on small details like the belt, binocs, and boots. Here's the comparison everyone has been waiting for. On the left we have the brand new Black Series Luke versus the now 9-year-old SH Figuarts Farmboy Luke on the right. I do really enjoy being able to look at the both of these two like this to really get a good look at any differences they have and really show how much the Black Series has been improving its figures recently. Unfortunately though, I don't think Luke stuck the landing as hard as some others, and that's why I like being able to look at both in an objective way side by side. So let's go ahead and get a better look at the two and do some comparisons while I give my thoughts as to why I prefer one over the other. Looking at the two figures side by side, there are some things I like more about the Black Series Luke and quite a few things I like more and prefer on the SHF version. One thing I will give to the Black Series Luke is the hair color. While I still don't think it's perfect, SHF went with a shiny gold color for the hair with a black wash over the top to simulate a blonde appearance, and the Black Series went with a brown color. I do, however, prefer the shape of the hair on the SHF as well as the likeness, which is a big thing for me personally. Another thing I prefer on the SHF is the paint. They did a nice wash all over the figure itself, and it really seals together the Tatooine aesthetic while the Black Series feels a bit too clean looking. I also think SHF really nailed that look of the tunic looking like cloth, especially in the arms, but the Black Series didn't do a bad job at all, except like I mentioned earlier, the sleeves did feel a bit too bunched up looks-wise. Looking down lower on the figure, you can really see that paint pop on the SHF's legs compared to the Black Series. I do think Hasbro have nailed their aesthetic of articulation and not having it break up the sculpt itself too much, which is nice if that's how you want your figures to look. One thing I do think the Black Series did better was the shape of the boots and the wash looking a bit darker to really emphasize those details. Overall, the SHF does still win in my book, but I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks in the comments. And there we have the review and comparisons on the brand new Black Series Luke Skywalker. While I do think it is a vast improvement over the original figure and is a pretty good release overall for only coming in at the $25 price point, it is still not quite perfect and almost feels a bit underwhelming knowing how good some recent releases have been in the line. I love certain engineering decisions they made, and they nailed the looks on the figure for the most part, but that likeness really drags the whole thing down for me, unfortunately. While I do find certain things extremely disappointing, I will commend Hasbro for finally biting the bullet and giving much needed updates to the main crew from A New Hope, and I do appreciate that they are taking certain elements from the SHF releases and putting their own spin on them. Overall, the SHF is still my definitive look of the character, but if you don't collect SHF for any reason, I can say I do recommend picking this version of Luke up for your 6-inch collection. I hope you all enjoyed the review, and if you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and let me know down in the comments if you plan on picking this figure up, passed on it, or already have the SHF version. If you didn't like the video, drop a comment and let me know what I can do to improve any future reviews for the channel. Don't forget to check out our weekly show, Monday Night Figureball, live every Monday at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, where we discuss Star Wars figure news from all lines including Black Series, imports, and Hot Toys, as well as discussing things from other toy lines that we all collect. I hope you all enjoyed the posing here at the end of the video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week.